James is very spontaneous.
Okay, I like that.
He's he steps into the flow state and just lets it all out.
Spontaneous. I like it.
But that's what's always happened before now.
Okay.
What occurs this evening remains to be seen.
Yeah.
It's going to be a trip, I'll tell you that.
Very good.
You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Your hosts are Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Our guest today is James Tripp. James Tripp is an internationally recognized and respected hypnotist, personal coach, and teacher. Coming from a diverse background including philosophy, music, martial arts, movement culture, and NLP, James is also the developer of the critically acclaimed Hypnosis Without Trance approach to hypnosis. Now this conversation gets deep, folks. It was a real pleasure having James on the show, and I hope you get as much out of it as we did.
So here we are, Authenticity Show, with the illustrious James Tripp.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
All right, James.
Okay.
Good to meet you. I feel like I've known you for a long time, but we just met like minutes ago.
Yeah, it
Really.
happens. It happens.
Yeah. I think you already cast a spell on me or something.
What is?
I feel like I've known you for years.
I have the YouTube channel, so people come up and they say, "Hey, it feels like I already know you."
Yeah.
Except recently at Hypno Thoughts, almost everybody said, "Oh wow, you're really tall," because apparently I look like a little fella on the videos. So
okay.
You're only 2 inches tall,
Yeah.
on my phone anyway.
that's what happens. They
Yeah.
go, they think I'm literally that size.
Yeah. Yeah. How did he fit inside that phone?
Yeah.
So I think that's what my dog thinks every time she sees other dogs on the screen. How do they fit inside that thing?
I was happy to know that you're not a two-dimensional character.
No. I'm at least three-dimensional.
You are. But
Very
you are a
possibly
character,
more.
though. You definitely are. You not only teach about hypnosis and things like that, but you have a background in mentalism, right?
I do, yes. I'm a recovering mentalist. Yeah, that was a huge thing for me. I got into mentalism and hypnosis around about the same time, pretty much the same time. And I pursued the study of both in parallel. Hypnosis, NLP. Whenever I talk about hypnosis, I actually mean NLP as well.
Okay.
Because to me, there's no differentiation. They're all in the mix. They're all the kind of same kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I've always kind of studied them in parallel. They've always informed each other. But that started around the same time as the mentalism. Yeah.
Could you describe the difference between mentalism and hypnosis?
Well, mentalism is a performance art. And that's something which I think a lot of people miss, because back in 2010, I did the Change Phenomena Conference in London, and somebody asked me, what is mentalism? And it was a very flippant answer I gave, but what I said was, mentalism's like magic, only you pretend it's real. And it was a flippant throwaway answer. But actually, the more I reflect upon that, the more I think it is largely true. It is like magic, only that you pretend it's real. So a lot of the things that are going on with mentalists are the same things that are going on with magicians. It's just they're pretending it's real. They really have these powers and they really have these skills. However, looking at mentalism as an art form, I see it as a continuum. There's mechanical mentalism on one end and there's psychological mentalism on the other end. And on the psychological mentalism end, you're going to get things like hypnosis and these sorts of things, cold reading skills, these kind of things, which are purely psychologically based stuff. On the mechanical end, you get the same kinds of mechanisms you get at play in a lot of magic. But the interesting thing about mentalism is how those things can blend. So a good mentalist is never doing purely mechanical stuff. A good magician's never doing purely mechanical stuff. There's a lot of psychology wrapped around it, a lot of suggestion, a lot of interesting principles to do with how the mind works, how perception works that are being played with. So it's kind of always interesting from that end. But the problem is the more purely psychological you become as a performer, the riskier the performance becomes, because now you're dealing with reality, with the unfolding chaos. And it may go this way, and it may go that way. It's the more exciting end of things, absolutely, unquestionably, but it is more risky. And one of the things that I found is I had a deep interest in the psychological end, but because I ended up becoming a professional, I needed stuff that would be reliable. So I ended up relying more and more and more upon mechanical stuff, which is not why I got into mentalism. Mm-hmm. And I kind of suddenly, one day, realized that I had become a magician. And I had no interest in being a magician. I never started out wanting to be a magician. I was interested in psychology and human beings, how the brain works, how the mind works, how we can influence the direction of people's thoughts and this kind of thing. So I got a lot from mentalism. I learned a lot, not just from the principles of mentalism, but also the practice of mentalism. But in the end, I had to part ways with it. Although it has been calling me back recently, because I'm thinking there's some things that could be done with mentalism that are significantly more interesting than the things that I was once doing, and could actually work in a deeper way. You ever heard of a guy called Kenton Nepper?
Oh, yeah.
Here's the thing he posted. Is your magic and mentalism more meaningful than creating foolish people?
Right.
And that's something, it was interesting that he put that up, because I've been thinking a lot about this recently, and I think that was something else, another reason why I left magic and mentalism at the time. As much as I wanted it to be about something more than fooling people, and therefore kind of creating foolish people, and I could kind of bury it in some clever frames, underneath of it all, that was still what it was about, and I was never comfortable with that. I don't want to create foolish people. I don't want to fool people. But if mentalism can be used in an interesting way to open up possibility for people, to really have them see deeper into something about the nature of reality rather than unreality. That's what a lot of mentalism is about. It's about creating this unreality that people buy into. I would be interested in using mentalism to have people connect more deeply into the nature of reality or perception and this kind of thing. So I'm kind of feeling the draw to go back and play with some mentalism stuff.
It sounds a bit like mystery performing in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
capital M mystery almost.
Right. I mean, I don't know necessarily what the difference would be there. I know I used to be a member of the British Society of Mystery Performers, and all of those mystery performers were mentalists. So from the UK side of things, I equate the two as being quite similar, although you've got bizarre magic and that kind of thing in the mix as well. Sure. with mystery performing. But yeah, there's something in it, and I think what I would love to find is a more organic way of working with it, of creating in the moment with it, rather than doing a performance. I do not like performing. I like to create in the moment, and that will be the important thing for me if I ever got back into mentalism. Well,
you're creating in the moment, but you're also creating a moment.
Yes.
Because if you're doing a mystery performance, I mean, think of Eugene Berger's wonderful lesson that he teaches with the strings, where he burns the strings and he does that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know Eugene Berger, but I don't know.
Okay, on YouTube you can see a clip of him telling this wonderful story, and it's poetic and it's meaningful, and then it has this sort of illusion that plays out in the description. Yeah, and it's quite beautiful because not only is it well performed because he's was an amazing performer, but his voice, his resonance, and the ultimate feel that you get from it is just a wow feeling, that mystery of, and in that wow moment, I feel like there's an opportunity to learn something that is beyond the words, or maybe the words are pointing at it, but you get nudged in the direction of opening up to a mystery, opening up to a deeper lesson that's being conveyed.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an interesting thing for me. But I love things that can point people in a direction and say, look over here. What might you find here? and have that be a genuinely enriching direction to look in, rather than one that somehow serves the ego of the performer. And that's one of the problems, I think, with the world of mentalism, magic, is much of it's there to serve the ego of the performer,
right,
rather than to really create something powerful and possibly even transformative for the spectator or the participant. That's a more interesting direction.
Could you use mentalism sort of to amplify the reality of a situation, sort of rather than creating a so-called false situation, but to maybe sort of use it as a magnifying glass, you know what I mean, to help people discover things that
I think you can help people discover things. I think you can certainly help to open people up to the idea that we live in the world as we create it to be, rather than as it is. You know, we live in the world as we experience it rather than as it is. For many years, I was a big Darren Brown fan. You know, Darren Brown, he's not as big here in the US as he is in the UK, but I was a big Darren Brown fan for years, and I went to see his live show year on year. For probably the first 5 years he was live touring. And then I kind of got Darren Browned out. I really did. It reminded me of when I was a kid. I used to love Clive Barker, the novelist Clive Barker, and I read everything that Clive Barker wrote until I was sort of gorged myself to the point of nausea on Clive Barker, and I couldn't read another word. I was like that with Darren Brown. But then, earlier this year, I was going over to New York to run training for Melissa Tiers in her Center for Integrative Hypnosis. And my friend Brian Mahoney, who's in Boston. I don't know if you know Brian. Do you know Brian in Boston? No. Hypnotherapist from Boston. Very good hypnotherapist from Boston. He said, hey, Darren Brown's doing his first US live shows. Do you want to get a ticket? Do you want to go and see Darren Brown? I said, well, yeah, sure. And I was kind of thinking, Darren, that'd be kind of interesting to see Darren, but really I'm still Darrened out. I'm done with Darren. But we went and saw this show, and I was imagining it was going to be in this big theatre, because I've only seen Darren in big theatres in the UK. And we turn up at this tiny converted church theatre that's converted to really small, and okay, this is going to be different. And we were not the first row, but the second row, really intimate theatre. And Darren came out and did his thing, and it was absolutely marvelous. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It really was. I'd seen a lot of the stuff before, because he had the luxury, first US show, of being able to take the best of Darren Brown for the last 10 plus years and create this wonderful show. But Darren was different. He was different. He had a deeper, this is the authenticity show. He had an incredible, he was so much more human, so much more authentic. The whole framing of the whole piece was about narrative and how narrative shapes experience. And it was a wonderful frame to put everything in, because that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's, for me, is pointing to something really powerful, really that can open people up to something that actually can make a huge difference in their life. Which was different from the old frames he used to use, which were about, I have these skills to manipulate people through magic, suggestion, misdirection, showmanship, and all of this. And it always used to be about Darren and what his amazing skills could be. But this was about something else. It was about something beyond Darren. And I think it was absolutely fantastic. So if you get the opportunity to see Darren Brown, if he ever comes over this side of the country, then definitely check him out.
Sounds good. When I was a young adult, I started to dabble with magic tricks for a little while, and now those people that know me well know that I'm a little bit of a ham, right? Carlos knows that I'm a ham.
A vegetarian ham.
Yeah, a vegetarian ham. So I don't mind getting up in front of people for the most part, But I noticed that every time I did magic tricks in front of people, I got incredibly nervous. And I didn't understand why it made me so nervous. I thought, this is just bizarre. I don't normally, I would like my hands would almost shake. And I thought, I don't behave like this when I'm performing in front of people. Why are magic tricks making me nervous? And Carlos, another dear friend of ours, they both started to shake their heads like Carlos is shaking his head right now. And they're like, oh yeah, we understand. And they said, you don't like to deceive people. I'm like, that's it. That's why I got nervous when I did magic. I didn't like to deceive people.
Well, it's interesting because we have an episode of the Authenticity Show called Sacred Deceptions.
Yeah.
And it's all about this topic.
Yeah.
And, where it could potentially have value for everyone.
Yeah.
And we talk about illusion, magic, shamanism, in different aspects of the sacred illusion, initiation.
Yeah. And I think I'm okay with
capital M mysteries. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting area. Have you heard of a guy called Aaron Alexander?
Yes.
Well, I got introduced to Aaron Alexander, not in
Pygmalion
person, but
effect.
Pygmalion effects.
Yeah, it's a good one.
By somebody who came on a workshop I ran earlier in a year. A mentalist from Germany came over to a workshop I was running in Edinburgh. And obviously he's a mentalist. We got talking about mentalism. I haven't really been paying attention to what's been unfolding in that world for the last few years. And he said, have you heard of Aaron Alexander? And I'm like, no, I've not heard of Aaron Alexander. So I checked out his stuff, and that Pygmalion effects was... The effects were like, yeah, they're cool. But his thinking around them was very exciting to me. And I thought, well, this has got some real gold in it. People look at things like psychic surgery and go, well, it's a trick. It's a trick because of the frame we put around it. It's deception. But, what if the deception is part of the real magic? What if it's part of the mechanism of the real magic, something that can make a real difference? And that was, I think that's been stirring around in my brain. That was around about March time that I got introduced to that. And that's been kind of floating around in my brain and maybe part of what's rekindling my interest towards mentalism. So yeah, that's a point I can relate to, and that's something that I could feel okay about. I could enjoy playing with.
Isn't Jason Silva the one who does the National Geographic show Brain Games?
I don't know.
It's all about illusions, and it's a fun show because they talk about the science of the illusion, and there's a part of it where you, as the audience, gets to try to figure out what's going on. Like you have to decide which one of these is actually darker than the other, or whatever it is, and then it goes and reveals later what the answer is and why you're tricked by it. And it's a pretty cool show. Jason Silva is one of those guys who talks a lot about flow and flow states, and it's pretty amazing. You've actually, Satch, you've heard some Jason Silva rants, I guess you could call them.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of inspired rants. He does really good. But isn't it that a lot of the illusions that we organically are creating with our own perception are necessary, and without them we wouldn't function very well? So in a sense, it's the deception of, let's say, the blind spots in our eyes that are filled in, and it's precisely because of that deception that the magic of our ability to see and not be confused by what we see works so well.
Right. Yeah, and on another level entirely, one of the things that I often teach in the kind of the more what I call personal alchemy stuff that I do with people is around the idea of ego and the functionality of ego. And by ego, I'm talking here about the kind of more Eastern use of the term rather than necessarily the Freudian sort of use of the term or the Jungian use of the term. But I always describe ego as being the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves to make sense of ourselves in the world. I don't know if you know the work of Antonio Damasio, who's a neuroscientist.
Self comes to mind.
Yeah, and
several others.
The Feeling of What Happens was that's the book that I read. That's my exposure to Antonio Damasio. But he's got this idea about these different selves that we have, and you can actually look at them working through different modules in the brain, which I think are the proto-self, the autobiographical self, and the core self. And the autobiographical self, autobiographical. It's the collection of narratives we hold about who we are, what's possible for us, what we can and cannot do, and all of this sort of thing. And you get a lot of these Eastern traditions, which I value a lot, and some Western traditions as well, things like the Three Principles, Byron Katie's work, and from the Eastern stuff, Hinduism, Buddhism, this kind of thing, that contain these ideas of waking up from the illusion. Some people talk about transcending the ego. But you look at Damasio and what he's pointing out, so you get people who have got the kind of brain damage that means that their autobiographical self is no longer functioning. They're still alert and they're still awake, and they can still eat a sandwich and they can still play piano if they could play piano before. But left to their own devices to look after themselves in the world, they're lost. Because they can't make any decisions about anything, they can't do anything, because they don't have the narratives to make sense of themselves in the world anymore, or the world around them. They cannot make sense of things. So they cannot make choices. They cannot bring themselves to bear upon the world in functional ways because they've lost the map. I mean, Korzybski, the map is not the territory,
right,
but the map has value. So there's this idea people are trying to kind of transcend the ego. But the ego is a functional illusion. We can say it's an illusion, but it's a functional one. It serves a function. I think if we were to truly transcend it, we would be lost. And I think people can transcend their ego. I mentioned, I think, at Hypno Thoughts, I used to dabble with psychoactive substances in my young days, and I had moments, experiences where I believed that for a time I transcended my ego. I have nothing to say about this because there are no words that I could possibly use to describe those experiences. I couldn't live from that place. So I think that there's a value in understanding illusion and the functionality. We deceive ourselves when we tell ourselves stories about who we are, but we must deceive ourselves in order to have these narratives to make sense of ourselves in the world so that we can bring ourselves to bear upon the world. It's functional illusion.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I teach with my approach to what I tend to call personal alchemy is there's two sides to it, which I sometimes refer to. I shall use these terms in this context: the yin path and the yang path. You know I have an influence from Chinese internal martial arts and Taoism and yin-yang theory and this kind of thing. So the yin path is the path of waking up from illusions, seeing the nature of the illusion that we live through, or at least waking up to the illusion. Perhaps not waking up from it, but waking up to it.
Is it inwardly focused? Is that
I think, yeah,
why you're saying it's a yin?
It's seeing like this that I am experiencing is mind-made. 100% of this experience is mind-made. This is not how it is. I love that shortcut. I don't know if Korzybski ever said this, Alfred Korzybski. Whatever you say it is, you're wrong.
Right.
I love that. For me, that's the yin path, and it's freeing, it's liberating, because it means any kind of trance that might grab us, any kind of thought, idea, perception set that might grab us, we can disembed from it. We can wake up to it and free ourselves from the trance that it creates, and therefore access different choices. And that's a wonderful thing. In the teachings from the Three Principles, they talk about thought being the creative principle. But what's interesting is they never teach anyone to create with it. And for me, that's the yang path. The other side is once you get this is an illusion.
Outwardly focused.
Right. You can wake up to it. And if you were to transcend it, that illusion of self, you may well do, the Eckhart Tolle thing and just sit on a bench for 2 years because...
With a funny laugh.
Yeah, what can you do? So, but on the flip side of it, there's the yang side, and I find this equally interesting. And the yang side of personal alchemy is what are the new illusions we are going to create? Because the illusions that we create, once we can bring consciousness into the equation, once we can bring our own volition in with regard to the illusions that we create, we can become self-authoring. We can utterly transform our patterns of engagement with the world in interesting and exciting ways. Not because we need to, but because we can. And it's interesting and it's fun and rewarding and all of these sorts of things. So that for me is the kind of yang side of things. which starts to relate more to, I have a distinction between alchemy and magic. And for me, alchemy, the way I use the term, is about internal transformation, transformation of self, how we are being in the world, how we are seeing the world, how we are engaging with life from the inside out. Magic is about how we change stuff out there, the differences we make out there.
Interesting.
And the two are often related. I think you can get people who are born magicians because they get raised into, they've got the right parents, the right environment. They get unconsciously some of the secrets of making stuff happen easily out there in the world. But they have no idea how they're doing it. They're like unconscious magicians. They just have the right operating system to be able to do magic, and they just, just stuff comes together. And then you get people who get programmed with a less than optimal operating system. And so they're not managing to get the interesting things happening in life that they would like to have happen. Things seem like a struggle. They seem difficult. Everything seems like a grind, and nothing seems to be working out, and all of that kind of thing. But they too can become magicians. But there is a deeper path of personal alchemy that needs to be gone on, because they didn't get lucky with getting the appropriate operating system installed in the first place.
All the environmental influences.
Yeah.
What you're saying reminds me a little bit of what Aleister Crowley would talk about magic versus mysticism.
Right.
Magic being the art of causing change to happen in accordance with will, and mysticism being related to that inward focus of connecting with the mysties, right? The mystery, and getting tapped into what it's all about, but not necessarily about changing the external world.
Yeah.
I've seen you describe yourself as a generative hypnotist.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what that means for you, and what does it mean to be a generative hypnotist?
Well, really, I mean, I'm going to point the finger squarely at Stephen Gilligan for that piece of influence. There is a generative intelligence that we are all blessed with. This generative intelligence. And it is generative because it generates ways of perceiving, ways of understanding, ways of being, ways of engaging with the world. We come into the world with a few reflexes. We've got a grasp reflex, a suckle reflex. What we don't have is any real conceptual frameworks in place for making sense of things. And so we're pretty much powerless. But by the time we're adults, well, we can go out into the world, and we can put our hands on things and move things about and make things happen and create some revenue flow and these sorts of things coming through. And we built that. We built that capacity. Okay, we weren't consciously building it, but we participated in the creation of that. There is this generative intelligence that we are all imbued with that creates ways of understanding, ways of being, ways of engaging. And my sincere belief is we always have this. It's not something which switches off once people get through their formative years, quote unquote. We always have this. So when I'm working with a client, we are working within the context of this generative intelligence. It is going to be generating differences, new possibilities, and specifically differences that make differences, to reference Gregory Bateson's line, "The difference that makes the difference." So I'm looking for differences that make differences. And I'm aware that the client that I'm working with has the capacity to manifest those. And I let clients know that really early on when I'm working with them. I will say, okay, so you got this thing. You want to change this. And even though we've only just met, there is something I can tell you absolutely with complete certainty. And that is that you can change your experience around this entirely, and the results that you're getting entirely. And then I will say to them, and I'm saying this not because I know you deeply, we've only just met. I know this because you're a human being. And that is the nature of human beings, part of the nature. It is a fundamental part of what makes us who we are and what we are. This generative intelligence that can learn, that can take care of our growth, our development, our change, and it is always there. And people may have switched it off. They may not have been using it for a while, or at least not using it anything like to its full capacity, but it's there. And I always say to the client, and I know you think that you're a special case of fucked up. and I say this to almost every client, and every single one nods at that point emphatically. Right? I know you think you're a special case of fucked up. I know that you think that you can't change this, or this is going to be especially hard for you, or whatever. I get that. Everybody thinks that, and it's completely human. I understand why, but it isn't true. So this is something I open up for people, and it sits inside of this idea of this generative intelligence. So for me, generative is summing up this idea: we're going to make differences. We're going to make differences that are going to make differences. We're going to make differences in that session, not after 10 sessions, not in a year's time. Things will change in that session. And that's whether I'm doing issue-specific change or coaching. And they will change in a way that the client will witness the change. They will go, well, yeah, that's really different. So that's the thing around, this is why I call myself a generative hypnotist. There's also something else I like about the term generative, because I think it honors the systemic nature of things. Mm-hmm. And that's an important thing for me. I look at things a lot in terms of systems and emergence. I look at things in terms of chaos and complexity. I do not believe that I can control anything that's going to happen for the client, or even anything that's going to happen for me. We're showing up in the same space. We are participating in an unfolding of difference, and the variables go beyond my conscious reckoning and the client's conscious reckoning. So we're going to kind of dance a dance with chaos and capture the difference that emerges from that. So generativity is something that has a systemic feel or sense to me. So it's another reason I like that term. But it comes from Stephen Gilligan.
You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Your hosts are Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Up next, Carlos and Satch go deeper down the rabbit hole with James Tripp, exploring ideas from martial arts, acupuncture, personal alchemy, and a deeper understanding of the meaning of trance. Stay tuned.
James, you're talking about generative changes and generative hypnosis, and in one of the classes that you taught at Hypnothoughts, you talked about resilience, and that I really love that, because rather than treating hypnosis and change work, NLP processes as something to alleviate the pain and just go into a bliss state of some kind, you were talking about bringing out a quality in the person that allows them to make choices, to adapt, to become the kind of person who could look at the problem differently, who could respond to the problem differently. And it sounds a lot like that's connected to this idea of generative change, generative hypnosis.
Absolutely. And I think is one of the interesting things. I do issue-specific change work. I do ongoing developmental coaching, and they're sort of different things, and they're sort of the same thing at the same time. I'm going to loop back to loops that were opened earlier before this recorded conversation started. You mentioned Bruce Francis.
Yeah.
So Bruce Francis, I don't know if you ever read his book, The Power of Internal Martial Arts.
Yeah.
I love that book. I really do. I love what I love about it. I love it for the same reason I love Robert Smith's Chinese boxing methods and masters, or masters and methods.
Masters and methods, yeah.
Yeah, masters and methods. Because I love the little kind of vignettes about training with these different masters. And he talks about his final Sifu.
Lu Hongbin.
Yeah. I was going to say Master Liu because I couldn't remember the rest.
Good enough.
But yeah, and I remember him saying that he was like a Wu style guy and a Bagua guy, and that he would practice Bagua Zhang until he found his energy becoming too hard, and then he would practice Wu style Taiji Chuan until he found his energy becoming too soft. But with every kind of iteration, the hardness got folded into the softness, and the softness got folded into the hardness. And I love that idea, that kind of folding in. I tend to oscillate, so I'll spend periods of time where I do hardly any issue-specific change work, and I do only ongoing developmental coaching stuff. And I get a lot from doing that, and then suddenly I need to shift. I need to shift back to doing the issue-specific stuff, really nailing down, getting really precise about this thing. And I'll kind of really get into that and do that for a bit. But every time I do one or the other, it's sort of like there's things that I learn and I get from that fold back into the opposite end of things. What this means is when I'm doing issue-specific change work, which is still what I call it, issue-specific change work, I'm always thinking generatively. I'm always thinking, who will this person be being when they leave here that is different from who they were being and how they were being before? Not just, do they now no longer bite their fingernails versus did they bite their fingernails? What else? What else are they seeing? What else are they connecting with in terms of their potential to, live a rich life and this kind of thing? And I'm not necessarily kind of hammering a lot of extra stuff in on top of the specific bit of change work, but it's the context that's there. And I think because the context is there, people tend to get a lot of shifts in that direction. Because the thing is, anyone who's listening to this who is a quote-unquote hypnotist, well, everyone's a hypnotist. Because we're always speaking from where we are at, from what we are experiencing, from the sense we are making of the world in the moment. We cannot speak from anywhere else. We speak from the reality tunnel that we're in. And as we speak from that reality tunnel, if we're effective in communicating, we kind of draw people into the reality tunnel. That's how it works. So we're all hypnotists in this respect. So for myself, when I'm in this place of looking and seeing this client and thinking, what is it that's possible for you on every level? How much richness can potentially open for you in life? That's the place I'm in. That's the place I speak from, without having to be strategic about it or tactical about it. I'm just going to speak from that place. And I think it kind of conveys, it comes across, it draws people into that. So I think I get a lot more kind of bang for my buck, so to speak, change work wise, than I might do if I just focused on this specific issue, if that makes sense.
It does. What's interesting to me is that you stay vulnerable in your process with clients. You stay in a state of curiosity and exploration as you're doing it, instead of defaulting to the technique that you could do really well and perform really well. Not saying that you don't do that, everyone does, but you're not coming from that place all the time. It's like you're staying in this place of possibility where anything could happen, and you're trusting your own intelligence to adapt and be sensitive and stay in sensory acuity and adapt. And I think that my understanding of self-development and aiming to become more masterful in myself, that's exactly the kind of place that we need to come from in order to better ourselves and to hone our craft and become more capable of adapting to everything that comes. And not everyone does that. I see a lot of very polished, strong egos in the teaching environment and in the NLP and hypnosis environment. But very few are remaining in that, again, naked authenticity, the naked vulnerability, that creative, inspired, curious, open space where this may not be a cookie cutter situation, but I'm going to do this in front of you, in front of a crowd of people even, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to go. And I love that. That's very inspiring to see.
And I think it's kind of where it's at. I think you've got to be able to sit. For me, I sit with a client and I see what's about to unfold as a co-creation, 100% between me and them. If I show up going, yeah, I know what I'm going to do with you. Yeah, I'm probably going to go off course pretty quickly unless I'm willing to let go of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with coming up with walking into a session with a few ideas about what we might do.
Sure.
But if I get attached to trying to drive any of those through, I'm lost. I'm not going to do good work. There is a co-creation. We are both present. And this idea of generative intelligence, their generative intelligence is present. My generative intelligence is present. And in a sense, because I tend to think in terms of systems, because we are present and connected, there is an emergence of a greater intelligence yet that goes beyond anything that we could personally track consciously. So being able to kind of be with that and get into that, one of the principles I teach a lot is get into versus get through.
Get into versus get through?
Get into versus get through. Gotcha. A lot of the time people are trying to get through something. They're trying to get through a change work process. They're trying to get through any process. They're trying to get from here to there. My goal is to get there, so I want to get through all these steps to get there as quickly as possible. And you even see it in the way things are coded in NLP. We've got the 6-step reframe. We've got 6 steps to get through. And so people get on with getting through the steps. And I think all the time people are in the get-through zone, they miss the real power, because if we just look at it at the level of hypnosis, hypnosis is about this moment and this experience and profound absorption in this moment and this experience, whatever this experience might be. It might be, a piece of hypnotic phenomena like a hand stick. But the point is a profound absorption in this experience, which is happening in this moment. But people are always trying to rush through. You see hypnotists, they're trying to get through the induction so they can then get through the deepeners. And when they get through the deepeners, then they can get through the change work pattern. And when they get through, they can get through to the wake up at the end. They can get through the session, and hopefully they've got through the change. I think that leads people to being in the wrong place. I think if you can just really be present with your client, be paying attention, be open to what's coming through, be able to work with what's coming through. That's when you can kind of get really cool stuff happening, which goes beyond any kind of technique that you might come into the session with thinking, yeah, this would be a good one to use.
That's beautifully said. When you say, the idea of getting through something is very future focused. Yeah. You can't be in the present moment because you're talking about this future state that you're going to be in, which might only be several seconds from now, but it's still in the future. And I love that idea of getting into something. It does keep you presently attending. That's nice. One of the themes that I'm hearing here is sort of the beauty and the elegance and the transformation that can occur when whatever it is that we do in our profession, we do it with a focus on more expansiveness. I really enjoyed what you said about the difference between thinking about, what technique you're going to use on somebody versus just being there and seeing where this goes and essentially being absorbed in who they are in that moment. It's interesting. I have the same experience as an acupuncturist. There are times when a client might come in and I start to get very mechanical. What points am I supposed to use for this? What herbal prescriptions do the books say you should use for this? And that usually happens when I'm looking at the condition that I'm treating as the condition rather than the person. What am I going to do for this tennis elbow or this migraine headache? Whereas it's more transformative to say, how are we going to harmonize this grandmother's body so that these migraines can dissolve or vanish, and then it's more collaborative, in taking that idea, it's interesting, even when you just use different terms to describe the people that you're serving, it's very different to treat a patient versus to have a client. I mean, it's very different. You know, a patient is somebody that you do something to. You know, a client is somebody that you're working with. A consumer is somebody you're serving. You know, I think it's worth just thinking about, you know, who is this person that I'm providing a service for? You know, is it a patient? Is it a client? Is it my mom? You know, it's different.
Or along the same vein, treating the person versus treating the disease.
Yeah, right. It's very different to treat back pain in a college student versus treating back pain in a new mother who has a baby. You know, these are two completely different situations, and the identity of the person that you're treating, it matters so much in what you're doing for them, and what service you can provide, and you know, how you approach them, and what you say and what you don't say, and
right,
all that sort of thing.
I mean, and for me, that's a huge thing. Partly because I tend to think about things in terms of trances or reality tunnels or the experience that we are, you know, shaping and creating in the moment for ourselves, because we're going to engage with the client through the experience that we are in the moment. So how we self-hypnotize counts. And how we self-hypnotize, well, we're self-hypnotizing all the time. If you refer to this patient, that framing has a hypnotic effect. It will put you into a particular, this is the way I see it, put you into a particular trance about this person. A client will put you into a different trance about this person. And I love that you're pointing that out, because I think this is something that I constantly want to get people to see, is how they, I mean, practitioners of hypnosis, I train hypnotists, and the thing that they're often obsessed about is like how they're hypnotizing the other person, how they're using their words to shift the other person's reality. A lot of people aren't even at that level necessarily, but you know, if they're getting somewhere, they're like, how am I using my words to influence this person? But what are the concepts you're bringing to bear in the moment that are shaping your own trances? Because you're always going to hypnotize, quote unquote, from a particular trance state yourself. So how you are making sense of the moment, the person, is fundamentally important. The concepts that you're bringing to bear upon that moment, you know, they're going to be game changers. That's where the real kind of leverage is. So it comes back to this idea again about sort of magic and alchemy.
Right.
Because the alchemy is the transformation of your own trances to create highly functional trances, to create modes of engagement in terms of doing change work. How are you going to engage with this client? You know, where is it going to come from? This is where the real power is for hypnotists. This is the stuff that I would really love to be teaching. Some people say it's philosophical, and they mean that as a kind of dismissal, as in it's not practical. But so far as I'm concerned, philosophy is practical. I think this is important stuff. When we're looking at philosophy, we're looking at the way we're understanding things, the way we're making sense of things, and the way we understand things, the way we make sense of things. That shapes how we show up, how we engage.
Right.
You know, it shapes our reality tunnels.
Yeah. To echo this idea of doing something to change yourself and how important that is in a particular discipline or a practice. I was heavily influenced by something that one of my acupuncture teachers said years ago. He shared that there's an ancient acupuncture textbook that told you how you're supposed to be thinking and behaving when you treat somebody. And what he shared was, when you treat a patient, you should stand as though you're standing on the edge of a cliff. And when you reach out and touch the needle, you should do it as cautiously as though you're grabbing the tail of a tiger. And that little saying right there,
that's
just
evocative,
filled me with awareness and the right mindset. I mean, I get goosebumps now just thinking about it again. And every now and again, I remind myself, figure out who you are and what you're supposed to be doing and what mindset you're supposed to be in before you start treating this person.
Yeah.
Am I as aware as though I'm standing on the edge of the cliff? Well, I wasn't. Well, but now I am. Am I going to grab that needle like it's the tail of a tiger? Like, really? Am I going to embody that for a moment? Now I'm really noticing and I'm feeling things. I'm picking up on subtleties of the situation that I would have missed otherwise. It helps me be a better practitioner. So I love the idea that that's what you really want to teach to hypnotists, is more of a mindset. I know from my personal experience, it transformed the way I treated forever. Just having one simple little saying.
Yeah. Well, James, you were talking about trances and that people are in all these different kinds of trances. And I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with the way you describe reality, they think, well, I'm not in a trance. They have this particular idea of what a trance is. Yeah. And you said something earlier that I was going to reflect back to you and see what you thought of it. You said that how you're making sense of reality. And isn't that a trance, right? How you're making sense of this moment is what you're referring to when you say the everyday trance. The trance that you're in is how you're making sense of reality in that moment.
It's how you're experiencing things right now. That for me is a trance, and the way I often describe it is any state of being from which automated behaviors emerge. So you're nodding right now as I say that.
Yes.
And you didn't think consciously, I think it's time to nod. Right? You just nodded because that nod emerged from the experience and the sense you were making in the moment of all that is this moment.
Right.
And it's this idea that we are never experiencing the world as it is, only as we are experiencing it in this moment. Hypnotists often think of trance as being a particular state that renders people somehow uniquely open to suggestion. The whole kind of hypnosis without trance thing, which is something that I'm well known for. Here I'm using the term trance, and on the other hand, I have this website called Hypnosis Without Trance.
Well, you have to know what it is.
You're such a hypocrite.
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in that,
you.
what I say is this particular special state of trance that you put someone in and then deepen them, and it renders them particularly open to suggestion, is a myth. And instead I say that's not how hypnosis works. And I introduce a model called the hypnotic loop. And back when I was first teaching this stuff, I'd refer to loops. And now I use the term trances to mean loops. And the reason I use the term trances is because it's more poetic and more evocative. Mm-hmm. And I'm a hypnotist, so I'm going to use more poetic, more evocative language. But the real sense is that we are never experiencing this moment as it is, only as we are experiencing it. And that experience is the trance, and certain behaviors will emerge from that. And it's amazing how often I play around with people all the time to demonstrate to them that their perception that they are choosing their actions is often misguided. I often do an arm catalepsy for this. I'll just say to someone, can I borrow that hand? And I'll set up an arm catalepsy. And they're there staring at their hand, and it's out in front of them. And I will ask them, now, did you choose to put your hand out there? Or did you want to put your hand out there? And they go, yes. Or they go, no. And it doesn't really matter because they're trying to make sense after the fact of what happened. What happened is just what happened. There was no decision making that was conscious or anything. It just happened. And then they have to make sense after the fact. They were in a trance. They're already in a trance. They're just in a following trance.
Right.
You might have somebody who says, every time my boss slams down the report I've handed on my desk, I just feel, that's the state they go into. And I might say to them, so are you lucid at the time? No, I'm not lucid. I cannot speak as I wish to speak. Because their behaviors are hijacked by the trance. Our behaviors always come from how we are experiencing things and how we're making sense of things in the moment. So we live our lives through this series of trances, and I talk about trance repertoires. We have a repertoire of trances, like a comedian has a repertoire of jokes, or a musician has a repertoire of tunes they could play, or maybe on a smaller level, a repertoire of riffs and hooks and licks and this kind of thing. So we live our life through these repertoires of trances. And those trances that trance repertoire pretty much dictates the habitual results we're going to get in the world. So if you want to get different results in the world, there's only one way of doing it. Because if you try and drive different behaviors from the same trances, it just doesn't work, which is what most people try and do. Right? And that's why they procrastinate and stuff like that, because I know what I should do, I'm just not doing it. Of course you're not. So this is the thing, it's change the trances, change the results that you get. But that's the way I use the term trance, and I think about things in those terms when I'm doing change work. What is the specific trance that we're looking to change here?
Yeah, I remember to that point in the class that you gave on nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
I laughed immediately when that gentleman tried to describe his reasoning in retrospect after his behavior.
Right.
And you instantly cued in on that. You kind of looked at me and you said, "Did you really? Are you sure about that?" Like kind of, asking him to question whether or not he really did choose that consciously, or is he trying to make sense of it after the fact?
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to think that you slipped into an unconscious behavior without being in control for a lot of people.
Right.
It feels uncomfortable.
Right, yeah.
To recognize that you didn't intend to do that thing.
Yeah. I think this is a very interesting area, and this is where hypnosis gets particularly interesting for me, formal hypnosis. There's a frame that Anthony Jacquin introduced me to. When I first met Anthony, he was a full-on old-school trance myth hypnotist.
Right.
And I remember when I was first talking about the Hypnosis Without Trance stuff, we had a lot of discussions about that, and he wasn't necessarily quite sold on it, but later on he did his own research with Kev and came round to an approach that's more similar. Maybe you'd call it a cognitive behavioral approach or whatever it might be.
Okay.
And Anthony came up with this really great insight, and it was hypnosis is the art of turning doings into happenings. And I really liked this frame. It's like if somebody's arm is lifting, they experience it as a happening, it's hypnotic. But the fact of the matter is they're lifting their arm.
Right.
So they're lifting their arm, but they're experiencing it as something that's happening to them. So that's really cool. And it really helped me out a lot with how I thought about hypnosis in a practical, pragmatic way. But across time I've thought, is it really that? Or is it actually more the removal of the illusion of doing from what is happening? Because how much of what we do is actually consciously done?
Right.
Versus how much is just unfolding, is just happening. Every single word. How many of your words have you carefully chosen this evening?
Who knows?
Who knows? And we're all speaking. Probably, if your experience is anything like mine, you don't know the next word that's coming out your mouth necessarily. So
I do know what I've been aching to ask you, though.
Yeah.
And it's related to this.
Yeah.
I would like to hear your opinion on free will. Or the concept of it.
I'm going to look wistfully away into the distance. Free will. Yeah.
You can wax poetic here. This is
Well, I think the interesting thing about free will is it's a kind of old term. It's a hackneyed term. Do you have that expression, hackneyed? Is that
hackneyed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I know there's sometimes differences for different sides of the Atlantic, but it's a term that's been used and used and used and used and used again, to the point where I don't really know, nobody ever bothers specifying what they mean by it, because they just pull it out and go, what about free will? And everybody does this. It's just sort of part of the lexicon of our culture. I think the idea, if free will means absolutely, completely free from any influence, then clearly the notion is utter bullshit.
Right.
So I would say, no, we don't have free will. But if we take this as a dualistic perspective, therefore everything is determined or random. I don't think that's true either. And I think somewhere in the mix, we have some capacity to choose. I've had this discussion with many people. My friend John P. Morgan, who's up in Santa Monica, and it's brilliant, and you really ought to get on your show. well, I had this discussion with him a number of years ago, and he was coming up with all these kind of logical counters to free will. And I said, look, I get all of that. I get that. But logic only works within certain frames. And what we're dealing with here is beyond any of the frames. But what it seems to me is I experience an I that can choose more primally than I experience anything else. I'm not saying that makes it so, but I'm saying that look, if there's evidence for anything, there seems to be evidence for that on my own, through my own sensory evaluation.
Right.
So I may as well hang my damn hat on it, because it seems to me that inside of everything there is a capacity to choose, and I'm aware that capacity to choose is not to choose freely, because the choices I experience are always shaped by the trance that I'm in. And yet, somewhere in the mix, there is this entity, the I that chooses, which actually resonates with the idea from Antonio Damasio we mentioned earlier of the core self, which essentially is the sense that I am, and the sense that I can act, that I have this, some volition in the world. A few years ago, I hired a guy called Steve Chandler. I don't know if you know of Steve Chandler.
Just by name.
Okay. He's written a number of books which are all good and all exactly the same, so far as I can tell. But great stuff, wonderful stuff. I love Steve's stuff, and he was my coach for a year. And one of the concepts that Steve introduced me to was the concept of the I that chooses. The I that chooses. One of Steve's teachings is stop identifying with your history, stop identifying with your habits, stop identifying with your behaviors, and start identifying with the I that chooses.
Interesting.
And maybe that's just another trance. Well, of course it's just another trance, the trance of the I that chooses. But it's a pretty powerful trance.
You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Your hosts are Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Up next, Carlos and Satch get deeper and deeper with James Tripp, covering topics like adult developmental psychology, self-authoring through manipulating your own trances, and real-life magic. You don't want to miss this.
Big influence on me is Robert Kegan. I don't know if you know Robert Kegan's work at all. He's an adult developmental psychologist who's written a couple of hugely impenetrable books. So I never recommend any of Robert Kegan's books to people, but I'm often recommending, and have recommended many times, a very short book which is available only on Kindle. I think it's about 99 pages, and I love how concise it is, and it's beautifully written. It's called The Discerning Heart. The subtitle is The Developmental Psychology of Robert Kegan. It's by a guy called Philip M. Lewis. I think that book is brilliant for helping it transform how I saw the world. And he's an adult developmental psychologist. He's following on from people like Jean Piaget, who's focusing on the child stages of development in children. Kegan's view was, well, do we stop developing? And is there a pattern to the ongoing development that adults go through? So he's mapped out these different stages. There's 5 stages. And the way he's got it organized is to do with really basically becoming progressively richer in your ability to take perspectives. And not only take perspectives, but then take perspectives on your own perspectives. And people who are kind of lower down, they don't take perspectives at all. Well, they do. They have a single perspective, which they believe is how things are. They believe it's a fact. How I see things is how it is the place that a lot of people will operate on. And then people will go, hang on a second, there's different ways of seeing things. This person sees it like that person sees... And they start to get that we all kind of have a different way of seeing things and maybe different values. But underneath of it, there's still this quest for, but who's right? there's still a belief that, yeah, there's these perspectives, but there's the correct perspective somewhere, and I must find it.
That's so alluring.
Yeah.
That idea that you could find the right one.
Right.
And so alluring.
And the search at this level, this is like Keegan's stage 3 level, is that the correct perspective is out there somewhere, and somebody's got it. And when people are at Keegan's stage 3, they're often looking to others for guidance. There's a lot of external referencing going on because, well, this person thinks this, but then, am I right to do this? Am I wrong? Mm-hmm. And they're looking to others to let them know whether they're right and wrong, unconsciously, all the time. But they get these different perspectives. The previous stage, stage 2, is just like, the way I see it is how it is. It's possible that your president might be stage 2.
We might not argue with that.
I hope I'm not opening up a minefield there with that. But so I'll move on from that swiftly. But stage 3 is this idea that there's different perspectives, but there's a correct one, and I want to find it. Stage 4 is about self-authoring. Suddenly like, hang on a second. This is down to me to figure out how things are. And yeah, I can start to play more with how I'm organizing things. But there's still an idea that there's a way, I've got to find my way to the right path, that there's a right path, and I've got to find my way to it in the self-authoring level. And then stage 5, Keegan's stage 5 is called self-transforming, where people go, well, we can think about this in an infinite number of ways, and we can experience this in an infinite number of ways, and each one of them is going to open up a different set of choices, and none of them is going to be all-encompassing, and, and it's this further sort of disembedding and a relationship with perspectives, and each perspective being a sort of set of possibilities in and of itself, and none of them being at all correct. And that's like the kind of stage 5 place. Keegan reckons that in Western society, most people are stage 3, some leaning into stage 4, very few stage 5 people. But the interesting thing is, once you start looking at it like this, certain things make a lot of sense, because somebody who is at a stage 2, who is very much, everything is what it is, the way I see it is how it is. If you see things differently from me, you are either insane or a charlatan and a trickster who's trying to delude people. And that's how kind of like a stage 2 thinker is going to see anyone who's a little bit more nuanced in their perspective taken, is a bit richer in their perspective taken. They're going to go, what on earth is this? It's obvious how things are. What are you talking about? You and your big words and your philosophy and all of that stuff. So somebody at that level literally is not going to get, somebody at another level, which is why this
Looks like we got ourselves a reader.
Yeah, right. And somebody at stage 2 could actually be phenomenally intelligent. They could be very, very intelligent. They could be able to do advanced mathematics or whatever, or be able to work stuff out like you're talking about, be able to do tangible things in the world incredibly well, understand, complex bits of software and be able to pick them up and learn very, very well, but be at this stage 2 developmental level, because it's not specifically about intelligence. Sure. And Keegan says that most people go through this phase and they transcend it around, their sort of mid-teens, really, and they'll go into stage 3, which is called the socialized mind often, because we now become aware there are other people and they have perspectives and they have opinions, and how do we fit with that? Stage 2, who sees things as they are, usually tends to view other people as suppliers to the self. Other people are pretty much there to meet my needs if I'm stage 2. You and I could be friends. We could all be friends. But if you were upset, the only reason I'd be upset that you were upset is because you might not want to be my friend and hang out and have fun anymore. Not because you might actually be upset, because... Do you see what I mean? There's a sort of different level of processing.
Right.
Yeah, it's like sort of like in child development, the egocentric stage.
Yeah.
You just can't see somebody else's perspective very well.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, by the way, of one of my wife's cousins. We always tease him because when he was a little boy, he said, "Hey, everybody, you want to see the lights go out?" And he covered his eyes real quick. And everybody laughs at that now
Right.
because he egocentric stage. He just couldn't see other people's perspectives. It's funny. It's cute.
Yeah, it's my daughter's, my youngest daughter, this kind of came up the other day. She said something that was kind of like not very tactful to her sister. And I said, so why might you want to make a different choice about, and she said, because then Lois wouldn't be upset. I said, yeah, and why might that be a good thing? She said, well, if Lois is upset, she won't want to be my friend anymore. She won't want to play with me. And it's like, that's the... I'm like, right, there it is. I can see the sort of level. She's 9, so I'm not gonna demand anything more at that stage. But it was curious to see that coming through. She's sort of, Lois is there to meet my needs as a playmate, and if she's upset, she might not do that.
Well, it seems like you with a lot of these things, you can't really transcend levels until you fully experience the level that you're at. I mean, it's not like you're going to go skipping levels or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I love Keegan's framework, and it really has helped me a lot with clients. It's helped me a lot with the developmental coach. It's helped me a lot with my own self-development. It's helped me understand a lot of conflicts that I used to have in hypnosis forums. Because interestingly, there's quite a lot of stage 2 hypnotists out there. I call them the power hypnotists. Everything I say will become your reality, and they totally believe their own myths about hypnosis unwaveringly. Sorry if I've offended anyone listening to this podcast.
They won't
who
notice.
might be a power hypnotist.
Yeah,
they probably won't notice.
If we haven't offended anyone, we haven't lived. Right?
Yeah. So
haven't stood for anything.
It's been hugely valuable for me. And when I first read Keegan's stuff, I was going, yeah, I'm like a self-transforming guy. It's obvious, I'm self-transforming. Yeah, I get this stuff. And then I kind of reread it and was looking deeper and going, actually, maybe I'm not self-transforming. Maybe I'm more like a self-authoring level, Then I got more deeply into it and I thought, actually, I've got a lot of that stage 3 socialized mind stuff going on. And I kind of, my estimation of myself dropped down considerably because I did have a lot of that stage 3 stuff going on. I did have parts of me that wanted to please people because I didn't want them to be upset with me, or one of the hallmarks of stage 3 is often feeling very torn. This is the authenticity show.
Right.
Having difficulties with authenticity because you're trying to be a certain way because this person holds this set of values and you feel you ought to maybe conform with them because you're not sure if they're the right set of values, and then this person holds this set and you're trying to conform with these ones, but then these two people show up in the same space at the same time, and how am I going to be? How am I going to be? Because how you're going to be, if you're going to be grounded in yourself, well, you have to at least have got to that kind of self-authoring phase. So I identified a lot of these stage 3 traits in myself. And then by identifying them, I think that ultimately has helped me to mostly transcend them.
What's that like, being the only person in this room to feel that way, James?
I have no idea.
Gosh, that must be really strange to have that experience all by yourself with neither of us having that experience ever.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I welcome the opportunity to be here with enlightened people like your good selves.
Indeed. No, it's funny because
it's quite a burden. Yeah.
As soon as you started talking about the idea of checking with this and checking with that to see which one's right, and I instantly resonated with that.
Yeah,
completely. And I could sense the times in which that's been a crippling experience for me, in a sense, like where it creates the feeling of not being able to do something because I'm being pulled in these directions. So I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I also think that like stages of development, like what you're describing, you could certainly go through those stages in one aspect of your life and then be completely way down on the ladder. And some, like professionally, you might be, further along, and then within your relationships, you're a a caveman, you know.
I think that was what was going on for me. Is like
Yeah.
in my professional work, I was quite self-authoring, but in my social life, I was still quite stage 3 socialized, you know, feeling a lot of these tugs. So that totally makes sense to me that there's a contextual element to it as well.
Yeah. Or with certain people, you know, new group of people come in and suddenly, oh my gosh, I'm like this. Different group of people come in, oh, I'm self-actualized, you know.
Yeah.
and you know, you're really neither if you're both if you're changing depending on what the situation is and who the people are. You know, then,
Plus, it's that whole idea that you know you aren't even that. You're just observing that that's what's going on in that situation.
Yeah.
Like the whole MBTI, the Myers-Briggs. You know, the idea that it was never really meant to be a personality label. It was meant to look at what functions were happening at different stages, and people can be running, you know, perceiver mode or judger mode at different times in different situations and with different people. You know, I noticed that in myself, that I can be extremely perceivery, to use a word, you know, to run the perceiver mode a lot. But when I'm around other perceivers, my judger personality comes out.
Yeah.
A lot. So it's not like a fixed thing.
Yeah. You guys know the old story of the emperor who dreamed he was a butterfly. You know that story?
Tell it.
So the emperor had a dream that he was a butterfly, and it was so vivid and so real. When he woke up, he was really torn, and so he found some kind of, you know, wise man and shared his experience. And he asked the wise man, you know, am I an emperor who dreamed he was a butterfly, or am I really a butterfly who is now dreaming that he's an emperor? And the wise man said, you're neither. You're the one who witnessed both.
Nice.
You know, sort of kind of what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing about like that distinction that I made earlier, arguing about what is or isn't so versus taking charge of your meaning making. Because, you know, am I the emperor that dreamed I'm a butterfly, or am I the butterfly that dreamed I'm an emperor? That's what is or isn't so. We can go to another level and, you know, I can be emperor and I can be butterfly, and I can, in any given moment, I am simply experiencing what I'm experiencing, being what I'm being. And I love this, I don't know if you know Stephen Walensky's work at all, but there was something as an idea that jumped out at me, which is all trances are identities. In that whatever trance you're in, that is the totality of who you experience yourself to be in that moment. It becomes the identity. All trances are identities. And on the flip side, all identities are trances. You've got that kind of two-way travel. You know, so butterfly trance, emperor trance, but what is everything else? 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 What is everything else? What is everything else? What is everything else? Butterfly trance, emperor trance, butterfly trance, emperor trance, but what is everything else? Butterfly trance, emperor trance, butterfly trance, emperor trance, but what is everything else? But what is everything else? But what is everything else? But what is everything else?
Another way I heard that put one time, which was interesting, is that all beliefs are limiting beliefs. At some level.
Right. And they have to be, because if a belief didn't limit, it wouldn't function.
Right.
Because as far as I'm concerned, the function of a belief is to limit. It's to channel choices down. Otherwise, imagine every moment, every choice that was possible was available to us.
Right.
We'd be screwed.
Nothing and everything would be happening all at once.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to limit. We have to. And this is the point about, when I talk about trances, traditionally hypnotists talk about depth of trance. I almost never talk about depth of trance. I'm interested in breadth of trance, how much is included and how much is excluded. That's why I like the term reality tunnel as well, and often use it interchangeably, because you've got the idea of the tunnel and the tunnel heads in a particular direction.
Robert Anton Wilson.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Tim Leary, actually.
Tim Leary, you're right.
Originally.
Right.
And there's everything that's outside of the tunnel. So I like this idea. So I often talk about breadth of trance. I will often talk about shape of trance as well. The shape of the experience. As a hypnotist, I'm there assisting people in reshaping their trances.
Love it.
Rather than putting someone into a deep trance. So these are kind of more interesting things as far as I'm concerned. But the limiting belief, it must limit, because we live through trances. Trances are functional. Maybe if I go into a state of anxiety, that's a high performance state. I'm doing anxiety exquisitely, perfectly. And high performance states must limit. They must exclude everything that would take you out of the high performance state. I think it was when I was going to Brazil earlier this year. I got on the plane, and I'd never had a problem with fear of flying or anything like that. Never have. That's not a trance that I've ever done. But the plane was going on the runway, and it's just made these horrible clunking sounds that just didn't sound right at all. And my brain latched onto an idea that perhaps there was something terribly wrong with the plane. And as soon as my brain latched onto that idea, I entered a new trance for me, which was one of some anxiety, maybe even fear. But I was able to step back and take a perspective on that enough to go, well, what I'm experiencing right now is a set of ideas that have come into my mind. This is what I'm experiencing. I'm in a trance, a set of ideas. So I used this sort of like John Overdurf attention-shifting maneuver and simply asked myself with genuine curiosity, what is everything else that I am that goes beyond this experience? And whoom, that opens up the bandwidth. But I also noted a presupposition in there that's not an overt linguistic presupposition, but I was still thinking about myself as a person at that point. I noted in my curiosity, which is now I'm in a very different state from the fear state. So I'll kind of chunk to another level with it and ask myself the question, what is everything else that I am that goes beyond the idea of personhood? And in that moment, that question, that was really trippy. I cannot evoke the same trippiness in this moment with myself, but what is everything else that I am that goes beyond the idea of personhood? At that moment, it was like the edges of everything were just kind of blown out, and I just went into this completely. I don't have it. It's the space beyond words again. It's and it was.
You did that without drugs.
Without drugs, yeah. Because this is the thing, what do drugs do? They alter trances, but what do concepts do? They shape trances, and this is where words come in. For me, words and concepts are not the same thing, but every word has a concept attached. It doesn't work if it doesn't have a concept attached. Not every concept has a word attached, but every word has a concept attached. So we can use words as handles on concepts, and we can use them to reconceptualize in the moment in a really deep, embodied way. So literally words, when used in this way, they literally can work like drugs. They shift our state, they shift our attention pattern, they shift our physiology. This is why, so far as I'm concerned, hypnosis works. It exists. It's got nothing to do with sleep deeper, and everything to do with how this word connects with a particular concept and how that concept shapes this particular trance, this particular experience. This is the heart of hypnosis, not this special altered state called trance. And it's happening all the time. We swim through an ocean of hypnosis every day.
Well, we've been swimming like crazy in this conversation. I mean, I feel like, sitting here with two powerful minds and we're psychonauts having a journey. And the shape of this trance, the breadth of this trance is shifting and morphing in really interesting ways. I've been in wonderful different altered states cascading one to another all throughout this whole authentic conversation.
Here. Yeah, me too.
Yes.
This is a good time to point out that I once read a Buddhist prophecy that a future Buddha would find enlightenment through a new type of meditation called trance meditation.
That's right. I remember you telling me that years ago.
Yeah. So, well, let's chew on that for a while.
What are you working on now? Like, what's next for you? Are there questions that you're itching to know and understand that you could share?
I mentioned earlier the distinction between alchemy and magic. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the alchemy side, I think I'm quite good. I think I'm pretty good at self-transformation. The whole magic side of things, I've got a lot of ideas around, and I think I'm getting better at it, and I'm increasing my skill with it. But I'm a long way off where I would feel like I have mastery. So that's the side of my life at the moment that I'm putting more into. And a lot of that is to do, it still uses the alchemy, because it's like, how am I shifting my trances, how am I shifting my operating systems? So at the moment, I'm figuring out the trances that best serve me in terms of creating what I want to create in life and in the world.
And that's the magic.
That's the magic. So,
as opposed to the magic we were referring to before, which is performance and mentalism and all that.
So this
is more.
I'm talking about real magic.
Right.
Now. Real magic.
Right. Just wanted to clarify that for the listener.
Yeah, I do. And that's something as well that I've actually, this is the Authenticity Show. Yeah. I've crept towards talking about magic in this sense for a long time, because I've been afraid for a long time that if I talked about magic in this sense, people would think that I was a whack job, that I'd lost touch with reality and all of these kinds of things. These are, those were my fears. And so it's taken me a long time to find the roots of those trances and loosen them off so I can be free to actually talk about something which is a significant part of my life. And I've gone around the loop and thought, well, what is magic? And there's that definition from Crowley, which I think is the art and science of causing change to occur in the world in accordance with will, or something like that, right. Similar to that. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a kind of good definition in some ways, and it's missing something in other ways for me as well. I also like Alan Moore's definition of magic, which is just like you bring something into the world that wasn't there before. It's like it's
a maker.
Yeah.
Meet your maker.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
right.
Alan Moore's pretty cool. For me, magic is the principles of non-linear generative engagement with life. This is the way I define it. So life is chaos. We cannot control it. But there is a way we can dance with that. There's a way we can meet with that, which generates results from it. And these results are non-linear. And this is a specific thing. There's a quote from Steve Jobs. He said, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. That's because we backwards rationalize. We put a pattern on it because it's chaos coming in. There are so many variables you have to play with. One of the things about magic for me is it goes beyond the mundane. So it's this effect of like, you go, how the hell did that happen? You engaged generatively and things came out of that surprise you in terms of their results, but things that are good things that are wonderful things that are inspiring and cool. So that's the thing. There's a quality to the magic for me of engaging with the world in a non-linear way and having these things emerge. So I'm kind of heading in this magic direction. I'm not teaching any stuff. I'm not like putting workshops together.
This is something you're exploring.
Yeah, it's something. Maybe in the future I will teach that, but I won't teach it until I got it reasonably nailed, and I'm looking like I'm living this way consistently and producing consistent results in this way. At that point, I'll teach it.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's exactly what I was wanting to know. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And people can think I'm crazy if they want.
Well, you are crazy, but we love you anyway.
Yeah.
You're crazy and you're not crazy. And you're,
yeah.
Crazy wisdom is the best.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
Life is crazy. How would people get in touch with you, find you, look you up?
There's
continue the conversation.
There's a few choices on that. If people are interested in hypnosis, I would recommend they visit hypnosiswithouttrance.com. That's a good place to go. People can find out about the coaching and the change work that I do on my jamestripp.co.uk website, which is a pile of junk as a website, really. But nonetheless, you can find out some things on there. It really does need reworking at the moment. And I would certainly invite people, if they are YouTubers, to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is James Tripp Chaos Wave. I would love to have people jump on there. I'm currently hiring some people to do the tech side so I can get more output on the video.
Well, and I can concur that the YouTube channel's loaded with really good stuff. I mean, you can learn a lot just by listening and watching the videos. There's a tremendous amount of information that you give out for free.
Yes, I do. And what I really want to do is I want to up that to 3 videos a week. I've said I'm going to do that before, but what's held me back is that I'm doing all the editing, I'm doing the uploading, I'm doing the... it's just, I want to just shoot the videos, get the mofos up there. So, so things are changing in that respect.
Very nice.
Great. Wow. Okay. It's been an excellent night, my friends.
Very good.
Thank you very much indeed.
Have a great night.
You've been listening to The Authenticity Show with your hosts, Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Very special thanks to our guest, James Tripp. The show is produced by Oliver Altine. Our theme music is composed by Oliver Altine. Remember to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out our website, authenticityshow.com. Thanks for listening and have an authentic day.